is the first time that Alec Murdaugh has been held accountable for his decades of thefts of more than $10.5 million from his clients and from his law firm and from others who trusted him. As you heard today, Murdaugh's financial crimes were calculated and heartless. His plea in federal court today is the product of nearly 2 years of investigative work by the FBI and the South Carolina Law Enforcement Division. Our goal in holding him accountable for the financial crimes in federal court is to ensure that he's never a free man again. We'll take a couple questions if y'all have anything.
In the indictment, it referred to crimes going back to 2011 to 2021. In one of your statements today, you talked about the scheme beginning in 2005.
That's right.
Can you explain the time?
Sure. He was charged with and has admitted to really 3 separate schemes. His scheme with Russell Lafitte began in 2011, but he had his own separate scheme that he effectuated with many different ways that we discussed today. And that scheme began at least in 2005. You know, financial records only go back so far, but we have evidence that beginning in at least 2005, he was stealing money from his clients and his law partners.
Did statute of limitations play into not charging him for those?
No, I mean, he is charged with all of those crimes, so to speak. The scheme itself spans that long. So he will be held responsible for all of those thefts at sentencing. Any other questions?
Are you going to advocate for any specific sentencing? I know that the judge is the one who makes the ultimate call, but does the government have any sort of number that they want to put on that?
Sure. So the process from here is that the probation office prepares what's called a pre-sentence report, and they calculate a guideline range that's based on a lot of factors, including the loss amount. And then once we get that guideline range, we take a position on what his sentence will be. So at this time, we don't know what the sentence recommendation will be, but we'll know more once we have the pre-sentence report.
Can you describe the 2005 scheme? I'm not sure I've heard of that, or it's not covered in the indictment.
Sure. So it's as outlined in counts 5 through 7. And basically, there's a lot of ways that Mr. Murdaugh effectuated his scheme. So we've heard of the forge account many times, and that's just one way that he stole money from his clients. But he also put fake expenses, for example, on disbursement sheets when those expenses didn't actually exist. He took insurance proceeds that belonged to his clients directly to himself. He acted as if there were medical liens that required outstanding funds to not be dispersed to clients, and then he ended up dispersing those fees directly to himself. And then, of course, he had a part of his scheme where the law firm was supposed to get a portion of attorney's fees that would be distributed at the end of the year. And then rather than distributing those fees to his law firm, he just took them directly to himself.
Ms. House, forgive me, I think our microphone, what did you say right at the top about him being held accountable first?
So today is the first time that he's been held accountable for decades of financial theft, spanning decades, and more than $10.5 million from his clients, from his law firm, and from others who trusted him.
As far as sentencing, there was, just to clarify some things, if he doesn't cooperate fully, then you're going to proceed with the maximum sentence. But as of now, I mean, do you have a recommendation, or is that going to come down to the PSR from the world?
Sure.
Explain the sentencing, I guess.
So
foreshadowing.
His plea agreement requires him to cooperate and be fully truthful. And if we are satisfied that he has done so by the time of sentencing, we will make a recommendation to the court that the sentence the court imposes here in federal court will be served concurrent to any sentence that the state court would impose for the same conduct. But we make that determination at the time of sentencing.
You talked about the fact about trying to get him to take a polygraph, the possibility of having him do that, the implications of that would mean, and the timeline of when you want him to do it?
Sure. We're not prepared today to comment on anything. Like we said in the plea hearing, the plea agreement requires him to be subjected to a polygraph at the government's sole election, but we're not prepared to discuss whether we intend to require him or have required him to take one.
How satisfied are the victims with this?
You know, we have been in lots of communication with the victims. They're represented by attorneys, many of which have been represented by attorneys throughout the course of these whole proceedings. They will have their day to allocute before the court at sentencing, and we really look forward to an opportunity to hear what they have to say to Alec Murdaugh about the impact of his crimes on them.
Ms. London, a lot of questions before we walked out here about what this means as far as where Mr. Murdaugh will serve his time.
Sure.
Is he not still under state retention because he failed to get bond? Can you just clarify that? I mean, I think the defense said it's a possibility, but we're not in charge of that.
Sure. So he is absolutely in state custody, both on the financial charges. He never posted bond on the financial charges, and of course serving consecutive life sentences on the murder. For him to ever serve in the Bureau of Prisons would require a lot of things to happen, all of which are beyond our control. We did not contemplate or anticipate that he would ever serve time in the Bureau of Prisons in charging or negotiating this case, and so that really is not anything that we've considered.
As far as being confident that that money is in the receivership for the forfeiture of the assets, is there any reason, or has there been any investigation by the federal government looking for money in other places, or do you feel confident that's where his money is?
So he's agreed to forfeit at least $9 million, and you heard today that they want the government to seize assets that are currently in the receivership. We have the right to seize assets that are at all involved in his crimes, but that will involve discussions between us and his counsel and the court in anticipation of sentencing.
Can you elaborate on that just a little bit more about what that looks like as far as the state is involved? Is there going to have to be a meeting of the minds there and proceedings as far as motions and fights as far as we want this money, it's been ordered to go to us, we're not giving it up, that type of thing?
And so can you move a little closer?
Sure,
Yeah,
sure.
Thank you.
Can you address all the cameras?
Sure, I apologize. I'm sorry, Mr. Tripp. So the state is obviously a separate sovereign, and we really don't have anything to do with their investigation or prosecution of Alec Murdaugh, and they will have their own rights to pursue Alec Murdaugh's finances and assets, just as we do.
Mr. Griffin, a minute ago, was saying that it's sort of an inevitability that the receivership funds will be transferred at some point to the Department of Justice. Do you agree with that contention?
We honestly are not prepared to know one way or the other. We just don't have all the information we need. We have not been involved in the receivership process at all. And so while we will communicate with the people who are in charge of the receivership as we anticipate moving forward at sentencing, we have not been involved in that process at all. Right. I think the goal for the receivership and for us, and for the state, I'm sure as well, is to make the victims whole by whatever way possible, right? And so our goal is to make sure that the victims are made whole. And we will do that by whatever means is legally possible. Thank you all.